VSiN, the sports betting network. This is the VSiN Morning Line on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Good morning, happy Thursday, and welcome into the VSiN Morning Line. Thank you for getting your day started with us. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi and Harrison Sanford. Cannot wait to get you ready for some Thursday night football tonight. But first, here's what's coming up on our show. We got a trio of guests for you today. Coming up in this hour at 7:45 Eastern, it's Brian Broaddus with the Cowboys Deep Dive. He covers the beat for Dallas Radio. Then coming up at 8:30 Eastern, it's Herm Edwards, former NFL coach and player, now analyst, with his NFL Week 4 preview. And in the 9 o'clock hour at 9:15, we have the Mike Palm with his Circa contest updates and Palms pressing 3 for Michael Lombardi. Coming up in this hour, we'll get into Cowboys Giants first, then take a look at some NFL and college football betting system trends to help you make some picks this weekend. Michael is revealing his power rankings, and we're going to get into that deep dive with Brian Broaddus. So let's get into the Cowboys-Giants Thursday night football game, shall we? The Dallas Cowboys opened as a 4.5-point favorite. That line has moved in their favor as they sit right now a 6.5-point favorite. Still 5.5 at some places with a total of 45.5. Michael, what is the key in this game?
Well, I think the key for the Giants is they have to keep the ball away from the Cowboys. I mean, the Giants secondary is the weak link, and they have been able to throw the football against the Giants. They don't match up in that secondary. So for the Giants, they've got to do what other teams have been able to do against the Cowboys, which is run the football, play from in front. Cowboys can't stop the run. They allow 5.6 per carry. And if you can control the clock, get the lead, and then get this game to where they're having to play catch-up, now Brian Burns and Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence can start rushing Dak Prescott and force him out of his comfort zone and out of his game. So this is all about the Giants' ability to run the football. It'll be a huge game in that area because the Cowboys have struggled to do that. Time of possession will matter, but they have to score, right? The Giants have played too much defense this year. The offense has only been on the field on average 28 minutes per game. So I think that's really critical. Now, here's where it gets problematic for the Giants. They've only scored 9 points in the second half all year in 3 games. 9 points. And they were very vulnerable to lose to the Browns on Sunday if the Browns would have done anything in the fourth quarter. So this game's about controlling the clock and then figuring out how are they going to win the fourth quarter, Harrison.
Yeah, as a Giants fan going into this game that actually wants them to get a quarterback next year, a good quarterback in the draft next year, I'm kind of worried. Because the Giants actually, I feel like, have a good chance to win this game and pull off the upset, which would be yet another upset of an underdog with 5.5 points or more, because they can run the ball. It's not obviously Daniel Jones has ability as a quarterback to run the ball, but so does Devin Singletary. As we go into tonight's game, Devin Singletary has the 6th most yards after contact in the NFL, 6th most rushing yards after contact in the NFL. And we know just how bad the Dallas Cowboys are in terms of their run defense. So there's an opportunity for them to hold on to the ball and keep the ball out of Dak Prescott's hands. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of pans out. It all comes down to, Michael, how fast can the Cowboys start? We've talked about it a multitude of times. When they get off to that fast start, it allows Micah Parsons and company to be able to pass rush and play to their strengths, especially with a guy like Trayvon Diggs in the secondary. But if they can't start fast, the Giants are able to maintain possession of the ball by running, and Malik Neighbors does his thing, which he's been able to do. We got a game on our hands.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this, to me, with the Giants, they've got to be able to run the football. The Cowboys, it's interesting. Mike Zimmer is an outstanding third down defensive coordinator. He has all different exotic looks. He can free up Micah Parsons. But here's the problem. They don't get to third down. Teams have been able to play Canadian football against them, so they've been able to get first downs and 2 downs. And because they've been so vulnerable to the run game, that they've really struggled. Now, look, the Giants have had no history of being able to beat the Cowboys. I think they're 1-8 over the last 9 games. And so it's really problematic for them to match up. They haven't really matched up well to them. This secondary for the Giants will be very vulnerable tonight. But the key to this football game, Grace, is you've got to control the ball. You've got to win time of possessions. And you've got to win the fourth quarter. And I think Daniel Jones has to run the football to be able to best utilize the Giants' offense, Grace.
Yeah, not just Daniel Jones and Devin Singletary and Harrison. I'm glad you brought that up, but they've been handing off to Malik Neighbors too and getting him involved in jet sweep. So it's kind of like a 3-layer rushing attack for this Cowboys run defense to manage there. On the other side, I was listening to some Cowboys analysis guys, and it sounds like the Giants have been blitzing at a higher rate simply to make it easier for the secondary. But I feel like once you let Dak run free, he's just going to tear up that secondary with CeeDee Lamb, especially because CeeDee Lamb right now is pissed off. He's been taking the blame for their recent losses, so he's going to go off. The Giants' top 2 cornerbacks are out for this one. So yeah, I feel like there's a path for either team here. That being said, I'll just tell you guys right now, I took the Cowboys at -4.5 on Monday. So I feel good that the line went my way. I felt like they should have been a 6.5-point favorite from the start. But looking ahead to the Cowboys' schedule here, or let's look at the NFC East standings. If the Cowboys lose this game, they are 1-3, bottom of the division. Giants would be 2-2. Coming up after this game, they're at the Steelers, host the Lions, at the 49ers, at the Falcons, host the Eagles, host the Texans. I mean, it doesn't get much easier, Michael. So if McCarthy loses this one, how hot does the seat get?
Oh, it's really hot. I mean, it's a hot one because, look, let's face it. I know it's a great story that the Giants won last week. But, again, if you study the tape in that game, the Giants were fortunate that the Browns have no passing game. If the Browns had a passing game and could have they had all their backup offensive linemen in, they would have easily come back and been able to score. The Giants got 2 first downs in the fourth quarter in that game when they needed it. They missed a field goal as well, which would have sealed the victory for them. But I think, to me, for the Cowboys, this is about correcting your problems. I mean, Dallas knows they're best when they play from in front. Dallas is not a great run defense. That's not going to change overnight. And look, I think, to me, Mike Zimmer knows if I could take Singletary and Daniel Jones out of this game in terms of Jones's foot speed and running, I got a chance to win this game. I can control the pace of the game. If I don't, and I get into this where they're getting first downs and 2 downs, I mean, the last 2 weeks, Mike Zimmer's just watched the ball go up and down the field, and I think that's really the problem. And so the Cowboys have yet to get control of the game to allow and it starts with their offense. It starts with playing from in front, Harrison. So to me, this first quarter is important, but the fourth quarter, when you only score 9 points in 3 games in the second half, not the fourth quarter, the second half, you obviously run out of plays.
Yeah, I would agree with the sentiment that Mike McCarthy should be on the hot seat if they lose this game. And actually, it doesn't really change to me if they end up winning this game. He should still be on the hot seat. It's not just how they've started this season in terms of being a poor rush defense and really being exploited in that way. It also goes back to the playoff game against the Green Bay Packers. An absolute no-show. Nowhere to be found was that defensive unit, and conversely, a lot of pressure put on Dak Prescott. Said it yesterday, I'll say it again. Jerry Jones ain't going to fire himself. And you can't renege on the Dak Prescott contract. You can't renege on the contract for CeeDee Lamb. So somebody's going to be held accountable for how they've been performing. I think they almost need to get the win just to keep things status quo. And status quo is still Mike McCarthy being on the hot seat.
Well, yeah, I mean, every coach is always on the hot seat because Jerry's the owner, right? I mean, let's put things in perspective. They haven't been to a conference championship game since 1994. We act like they've won 5 Super Bowls in this century. I mean, they haven't. I mean, this has been a team that has struggled. They haven't come together, and it's hard. And McCarthy did a really good job last year, but we know what happened in that playoff game. They couldn't stop anybody. They turned the ball over. They looked like they weren't enthused about the game. And Jerry really, made a statement all off season. Grace, you keep saying that he's went all in, and I don't disagree. He kept saying that. But you can't find how he did improve his team. Is his team better than it was last year? I don't see it. I really don't. I mean, they don't have a running game. Right? They have no ability to run the football. Now, if they can't run the ball to the Giants tonight, it's going to be problematic for them. I mean, this is a game they have to start fast. And with the bad taste in their mouth against Baltimore and against New Orleans, they should come into this game and start fast. This game is going to determine, like you said earlier, Grace, the future of their season.
Right, because as it stands, the Commanders, Eagles both have 2 wins. Commanders have Cardinals, which we know now. Commanders can win in a shootout. Then they have the Browns. So you're looking at a Commanders team that could be leading the division, at least temporarily. Michael, do you think they have a shot to make some real noise in this division?
The Giants, you say, or the
no, Commanders. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Commanders. I mean, look, I think, we know nobody's won this 2 years in a row, right? And the way they looked on Monday, you can't deny it. Now, they're not good enough on defense. I mean, Cincinnati moved the ball effortlessly up the field, but they never could get control of the game because Cincinnati couldn't stop them from moving it. I don't know if you can win a division with a defense as bad as Washington is. It's always going to be 1 or 2 plays that if it goes against you, you're in a lot of trouble.
Well, it'll be interesting how this one plays out tonight as the Cowboys try to get their 7th straight win against the division rival Giants. Coming up on the other side, there's actually a reason, believe it or not, that you should be betting the Jacksonville Jaguars this season. We're breaking down some of the most popular betting systems for NFL Week 4 and college football Week 5, hoping to help you stay informed when you make your bets this weekend. Keep watching. This is the VSiN Morning Line.
There's nothing more valuable. It's what drives everyone to make the most of every moment. We celebrate living large in the now. In a city where time disappears, we create experiences that electrify the soul and memories that will last forever. We go big, we go all night, and here, everyone is invited. So get loose and get loud.
This is Circa. You'll have the time of your life.
Thursday on Follow the Money, we preview Thursday Night Football. John Talty on Alabama, Georgia. Brad Powers on the college football schedule. Paul Charchi in fantasy and picks. And Steve West, a meat man on soccer. Follow the Money weekdays, 4 to 7 Eastern on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Want to see who at VSiN is on a hot streak? Go to VSiN.com/picks to see all the selections and weekly leaderboard of VSiN hosts, writers, and guests. Become a VSiN Pro subscriber and get every pick sent to your inbox daily. Just head to VSiN.com/pro.
So, Paulie, have you had a chance to read the VSiN Daily yet?
Yeah, came in at 3 a.m. What's Bill doing up that late?
Well, rumor has it, it starts off with a 12-hour meditation session.
Then he just pours himself over film and live TV, really focusing and taking it all in. Bill's in with the biggest insiders, talking trade secrets, strategies, the whole nine, absorbing the info.
And then and only then can the writing process begin.
In Las Vegas, Bill's Late Night becomes your early morning. Wake up to the very latest betting insights in your inbox with the VSiN Daily. Sign up for free at vsin.com/newsletter.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the VSiN Morning Line. Harrison Sanford, Michael Lombardi, and Grace Remington joining you on this Thursday morning as we kick off another slate of football action and hopefully kick off a winning weekend for the bettors out there that are tuning in to the show. If you go right now to VSiN.com, Steve Makinen does have an article where he's going to lay out some betting trends for you to hopefully make you a more successful bettor this upcoming weekend. There's a number of trends that we're going to attack in this segment that I think you guys should be paying attention to. So let's go to trend number one. NFL underdogs of 6 points or more are 8-5 straight up and 12-1 against the spread this season. And why does that matter? Because you have some games this weekend where that rule can be applied. It even starts tonight with the New York Giants taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Your thoughts on this one, Michael, and some other teams, by the way, the Broncos, Jaguars, Patriots, and Chargers, this would all favor them as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you just take the points this year, you're really profitable. I think, to me, this week 3, now we go to week 4. I think you really have to adjust your power rankings. Enough of what we thought in the offseason. This is about what's happening now, right? And we see the betting public. I mean, Grace talked about, she got this line at 4.5. It started at 4. It's gone up to 5.5. It really, I don't see any 6s out there. It kind of hit its plateau, so it stayed pretty firm. But to me, taking the points has always been a good thing, and especially I think in these divisional games, Harrison. I think when you're looking at divisional games, the line doesn't factor in the familiarity that both teams have with one another and the high level that both teams play because of it being a divisional game.
Yeah, definitely something we have to pay attention to. That divisional game, but particularly with that Texans and Jaguars, is one that you definitely pointed out as well, especially as we saw the line movement go further towards the Texans after the Jaguars' embarrassment, and I mean embarrassment, of a loss on Monday Night Football. Speaking of losses, Kansas State came off of one this past weekend that was very disappointing to Kansas State backers, one including Grace Remington, and she'll discuss that in just a moment. Because here's a trend for you. Kansas State is 10-1 is on a 10-1 against the spread run in Big 12 action when coming off a blowout loss of 20-plus points or more. So Kansas State had that loss to BYU. Now they go into Week 5, Grace, taking on Oklahoma State as 5-point favorites. What did you see last week, and how could you apply that to this trend?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That one hurt. So last week,
my bad.
You're good. Last week was pretty fluky because of some bad special teams play. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw that punt return touchdown. If you play this game 100 times, that play will never happen again. The kid muffed the punt inside the 5-yard line and somehow ran it all the way back. You're not going to see that again. BYU had drives, thanks to turnovers, of 27, 29, and 38 yards. If you go look at the game itself, Kansas State dominated on a down-to-down basis. They won time of possession, number of plays, first downs, total yards, rushing yards by far. It was just a really unlucky game. And when it comes to this trend specifically, Chris Kleiman always coaches them up. This isn't a team that stays down long. And Oklahoma State was actually on the wrong side of this trend 2 years ago. When K-State came off a TCU loss, they faced Oklahoma State in Manhattan right after and blew them out 48-0. So right now where the line is, I think that's exactly where it should be. So I don't see an edge on this one, but I do think K-State wins.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I do like the K-State offense. Conversely, when you put it against that Oklahoma State team that's really powered by Ollie Gordon. While he's a spectacular running back, I have, in the games that I've watched Oklahoma State, not been impressed with what they've been able to do in their passing game so far. So backing K-State to win, I don't know about laying that many points, but for sure it feels like that is definitely the way to go. All right, let's jump over back to the NFL now, and let's talk about those Jaguars yet again. Why don't we? Teams that lose by 35-plus points or more are covering at a 62% rate in their next game. When those teams are +4 or higher in the next game, they are covering at a 73% rate. Again, this backs the Jaguars, Michael, despite, again, how bad they looked on Monday Night Football.
Well, I think you got to throw that out, Harrison. I mean, we've seen it so many times. Look how bad Carolina looked, 2 weeks ago, and then they go out to Las Vegas and surprise everybody. I understand they made the quarterback change. This line got to 7 yesterday and immediately got bought back to 6.5. And there's a couple sixes in the market. These are games that typically go back and forth. And I think, to me, when you study Houston, right, when you really look at what Houston's been able to do, they haven't been explosive offensively. I mean, they've gotten 18. They're fourth in the league in the most field goals kicked. They have not been able to really make explosive plays. I mean, everybody wants to call Stephon Diggs a number one receiver. The guy averages 8 yards a catch. He's got 20. He leads the team in catches. They're getting the ball to him instead of Nico Collins. We don't know where. If you have Tank Dell in fantasy, you're wondering what the hell's going on. And so I think, to me, this Houston team, I think, is overvalued because of the perception. I think they're good, but I think they're overvalued, and I think that Jacksonville knows how to play them. They won there last year. I think 6.5 is too many points. I really do. This trend, to me, it speaks volumes to me, because one thing I do know, having been in the league, is when you lose and get humiliated on national TV, everybody's attention and focus in that meeting room on Wednesday is locked in. Nobody wants to get beaten twice. I think you'll see a better outing from Jacksonville defensively and offensively.
Yeah, it would seem as if the season's on the line, if it hasn't been already, for the Jacksonville Jaguars. But that matchup again, if Josh Allen was able to dice up that secondary, I have to feel like C.J. Stroud and company can, but that number a little bit too long to back the Texans, or at least as it presently stands, and at least it's not a trend that I want to be going against. All right, back to college football now, and let's talk about the team out of the Big Ten. Michigan, they are at 11-2 against the spread in their last 13 games versus Big Ten foes when coming off of a home win. Now, obviously, they have been seen as one of the premier teams in the conference, and this weekend they get Minnesota, where they're laying 9.5. And Grace, there does seem to be some quarterback clarity out there in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I was really pleased with the way Michigan played this weekend, finally returning to their identity. When it comes to this trend specifically, I think it's somewhat irrelevant. First of all, because they've had obvious dominance the last 3 years. This is a different team, so I'm not sure this trend specifically applies to this team. But even though we are a little bit lower on Michigan this year, they should be winning every home game, unless it's Ohio State or Oregon. And this one-dimensional offense, not so sure it'll beat those two juggernauts. But for now, I think this trend stands. On Thursday, you're not going to see many edges. Kind of the same thing here. 9.5 is a good line. That's where it should be. So it's not one I'm betting, but I do think Michigan has a good chance of covering.
Yeah, I think they do as well. I will say this, though, just full transparency. I'm not a fan of betting Michigan one way or another. I can't do it with the offense that has under 10 passing attempts per game. I don't even know if that's the actual number.
It works in the Big Ten.
It could be Yeah, it could be a hard watch, that is for sure. Again, you can find these trends on Steve Makinen's article on VSiN.com. Let's go into another NFL one. And this one has to do with the bye week, and I'm going to be curious what Michael's thought is on this one. Home underdogs heading into their bye week are covering at a 65% rate since 2015. So if you factor that in, that would include the Los Angeles Chargers plus 7.5 against the Chiefs. But Michael, does it really matter if your bye week is coming up? Wouldn't it be more impactful if you just came off of your bye week? What does a bye week coming up actually mean?
Well, it means that the coach can dangle a carrot. That's the key about having the bye week coming up. Look, fellas, we win this game. Instead of coming in here on Wednesday, I'll give you Wednesday through Sunday off. That's a powerful motivator. And so unless you're injured, we're not going to practice. We're going to take a week off. But if we lose, we're coming in there. We're going to practice on Wednesday. We're going to practice on Thursday before we have to give you the mandatory days off. I think that's the motivating factor that goes into these weeks before the bye. Most people think, well, the bye, everybody's mind's somewhere else. No, that carrot that they dangle in front of them is what motivates them to play as well as they can and then get some rest and give the players time off. Time off is a powerful motivating tool, Harrison.
Mm-hmm. I guess I didn't think about it that way. I think I thought the bye week was more impactful coming off of it because you could get a break. But then at the same time, you don't know how restful or how much those players were actually prioritizing that time off. Let me go through some other college football trends, or at least one more before we go to break. College football teams coming off a bye and playing as conference road dogs of 7+ points or more are covering at a 57% rate since 2010. So that would allow us to look at Arizona +12 at Utah and Wisconsin +16 at USC. Again, you can find more of these trends on VSiN.com. When we come back from break, the Kansas City Chiefs are not number one in Michael Lombardi's power rankings, despite the fact that they are 3-0 and Super Bowl champions. He explains why. That's coming up next, right here on the VSiN Morning Line.
The only thing better than football is the excitement of all the contests. Catch the Circa Friday Football Invitational at 9 p.m. Eastern with picks from some of the sharpest bettors around the country. Then on Saturdays at 9, watch the Football Contest Show, where our expert hosts and guests go through the consensus choices for some of the biggest betting contests in the world. The fun doesn't stop there. Visit VSiN.com for the full lineup and join us on the Sports Betting Network.
This is VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back into the VSiN Morning Line, where we love a good power rating. And for the first time, at least for the first time on this show, Michael Lombardi is revealing his most recent power rating. So let's get into that now. But before we get into the top 5, Michael, can you kind of explain for us, how do you calculate or measure these teams? What kind of stats go into this?
Well, that's what makes it so hard is the first couple of weeks of the season, the stats are so loose in terms of not having enough real substance to them because there's only played 2 games. After 3 weeks, you feel a little bit better about your power rankings. But what I try to do, Grace, is I take what I consider the 18 most important qualities that determine the game. For example, red zone offense, third down offense, points per play defensively, defensive sack per pass play, how many punts a team forces per game. Those are all critical because it's not, if you have a good third down number, but you don't force punts, that means teams are trying for it on fourth down. So you got to have things that kind of work within harmony of one another. And then obviously the quarterback rating and then the coaching rating too goes into play. So once you add up all those numbers, then you come up with a power ranking. It's based on, this is who they are. The hardest part for me in the power rankings is determine how bad, because remember, there's only 32 numbers you're dealing with here. Mm-hmm. So the worst team only gets 32, but like last year, Carolina was worse than 32, even though that was the number they got. So sometimes, especially on these wider spreads you get into, that's what happens. And then you come up with your power rankings, and you were able to see, this is not, so you take it out of the bias era. When we went to break in the last block, Harrison was talking about the Chiefs are Super Bowl champs and they're 3-0. Well, you need to remove that bias from your analysis because that the numbers should tell you about the team, right? The numbers are more important. Everybody still considers the 49ers a Super Bowl team, but their numbers don't look like they have a chance to be a Super Bowl team again. So I'm trying to remove bias, and I'm trying to make it just strictly on the numbers.
Yeah, Mike, I could totally understand that. I think my follow-up to that question, as you detailed some of your 18 points of criteria to make your power rankings, how do you factor in injuries when you look at the power rankings and their impact on those third down conversions, the impact of those players being able to force punts and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think you have to, that once you get the number, because the players involved in the number, then you have to adjust it. And obviously, injuries take a toll. But for example, what will Miami's number be if Tyler Huntley comes in, right? I mean, so then what I try to do, Harrison, is once I get my power rankings, then I set my own number. So Tennessee, Miami, I have this, Miami should be favored by 3.6 based on what I believe, based on the numbers Miami has accumulated, 2 games with Tua, 1 game without him. Well, now, is it really a 3.6 game? Because if Huntley plays, he's not going to play nearly as effectively as Tua did. So now you've got to make some adjustments here. And I think that becomes subjective. And that's the hard part that this is. For example, Cincinnati's going to have to play without Trent Brown, who wasn't playing good, and now they have to put Mims in there. And then both their defensive tackle, B.J. Hill and Sheldon Rankins, are going to miss the game. So how does that affect a run defense that was already poor? Those are things you got to weigh in, and you really can't really do that until Friday when you know the injury report has come in, Grace.
I have one more question, Michael, before we get into this, just based on something that you said. You talked about removing bias, which, yes, we all want to do when it comes to sports betting and power ratings. One of the things, I watch a lot of college football. We almost have to have those first 3-4 games of the season because there's so much turnover on these teams. The nice thing about the NFL is we know quite a bit about these teams from last season or the previous few years. So how much of their production from last year do you keep in this year's power rating?
Well, I always go back and look at the team in week 3 of last year. I look at what I picked. I mean, I save all these weeks of these power rankings and I go back and look at them. But I think, to me, we're now at the point where last year was last year. And you just dismiss it, that either you're catching on, like Green Bay, for example. I think their power ranking is going to continue to go up if they get Love back. I mean, they've run the ball so effectively. They've controlled the clock. They've been so good. They only had to go for it on fourth down one time in 3 games. Their time of possession's been outstanding, and yet they played a backup quarterback. So I think what they did last year, you kind of have to dismiss, because it really wasn't until the week 14, 15 of the season when they went into Minnesota and blew them out that we really said, wow, Green Bay could be good. I think you have to kind of use a little bit of that, but realizing that it's going to carry over, and sometimes it's going to carry over in a negative way, like Jacksonville.
Well, let's get into the top 5 now, and you can explain after we reveal them. So, number 1, you have the Buffalo Bills, followed by the Kansas City Chiefs, the Green Bay Packers at 3, Philadelphia Eagles at 4, and Detroit Lions at 5. How do you feel about your top 5 here?
Well, I think Buffalo's significantly better than everybody, right? I think Buffalo's numbers have come shining through. You know, the defensive performance against Miami was outstanding. Their pass coverage against Kyler Murray in the first game was outstanding. And then last week they dominated the game. So it's no surprise they're the number 1 team. I mean, Kansas City's numbers are really related to their ability to play defense, and they're close. You know, Green Bay's my 3rd best team, and people would say, well, how is that possible, right? You know, they're 2-1. And they're ahead of Philadelphia, but I think Green Bay is trending in the right direction. When you break down this Green Bay team and you study their numbers and you look at them and the way they've been, now, you know, it's kind of interesting when you look at Matt LaFleur and what he's done. It's fascinating. In the first 3 weeks, I just wrote this morning when I was going over my notes here. Matt LaFleur in the first 3 weeks is 15-3 against the spread in his career. Afterwards, he's 40-35 ATS. So, but they've done an amazing job of running the football, controlling the line of scrimmage. Like I said, they have 111 attempts. That's why they're up there. Their rushing and completions is outstanding. I think Philly, what they did last week by the way they changed their defense, the way they took away the outside zone's good. To me, Detroit underachieves. Detroit should be better than they are, but because they haven't really been clean in a lot of these games, it's been a little too hard for them.
Yeah, Michael, I like this list. Obviously, a little bit more qualified than me to actually give out a top 5. But I will tell you this. Throughout the duration of our show, you haven't been the biggest fan of one Nick Sirianni. So I must say I'm quite surprised, because I know head coaching is part of your criteria, that they still made the cut, particularly over the Lions.
Well, I mean, look, they you know, last week they won a game. I mean, they should be 3-0, right? I mean, their numbers, again, I take bias out of this. He got his grade from me, but at the end of the day, their numbers, I mean, they dominated that Saint game. They gave away some of his decisions. They've overcome him. And, you know, they couldn't overcome him in the Falcon game because he made a couple mistakes. But I think Philly, especially last week defensively, showed vast improvement. Now they're hurt this week. See, here's the issue, right? That goes back to your original question, Harrison. They're hurt this week. So now you got Lane Johnson may not play. Devontae Smith may not play. They've got a bunch of people that are going to get hurt. This Tampa team's healthier. They still don't have Vita Vea. So, Grace, that's what makes the handicap in this game so hard, is who's going to play, and is the power ranking, what we know the first 3 weeks, going to carry over into week 4?
One more question on your top 5. How far off are the Ravens from your top 5? And if they beat the Bills, where would you rank them?
The Ravens would be the 7th team. San Francisco and Baltimore just fell out of it, and they're very close. I mean, the difference between Detroit and Baltimore is maybe just a half a point, 1 point. I mean, that's very close. It's very close. So, but Baltimore's inability to win the fourth quarter really hurts them. I mean, they gave up 19 points in the fourth quarter again last week. So part of my numbers too is, how do you play in the fourth quarter? How many first downs do you get in the fourth quarter? You know, a lot of teams can get first downs in the first quarter, but sometimes, like New York Football Giants, they got 2 first downs in the fourth quarter last week. You get 2 first downs in the fourth quarter and you don't score any points in the fourth quarter, you're probably going to lose the game.
All right, let's get to your bottom 5 NFL teams now. You have the Tennessee Titans at 28, Las Vegas Raiders at 29, New England Patriots at 30, New York Giants at 31, and the Carolina Panthers at 32. Your thoughts on the bottom 5?
Well, I mean, look at every one of these teams. What's the commonality between all these teams? No quarterbacking play, right? There's no quarterbacking play. Tennessee, they can kid themselves that Will Levis is going to be the guy. Las Vegas, I mean, look, they already made a quarterback change. Now they went back to Gardner Minshew. New England's playing Jacoby Brissett, not Drake May yet. The Giants, I mean, look, Daniel Jones, they could pay him $40 million. They could do whatever they want. The guy averages 5.5 yards per attempt. And then Carolina, obviously Andy Dalton's better right now than Bryce Young, but I think that's the commonality of those teams. They're just not getting enough good quarterbacking play. The team for me that's really far down there that I think is overvalued is Cleveland, and it's kind of been proven in the market. I mean, think about this. The Raiders, it opened as a pick'em. Vegas money this week has been huge. The Raiders are now a 2-point favorite in this game. I have them rated. I have Cleveland rated better in the power rankings. But I think I can understand that line movement there.
All right. Well, those were Michael Lombardi's most recent power ratings. We'll get an update next week. Coming up next on the VSiN Morning Line, we're getting you ready for Thursday Night Football with the guy who knows the team best. Dallas radio host Brian Broaddus joins the show with Michael Lombardi to talk Cowboys Giants.
In the heart of downtown Las Vegas, a sports oasis awaits. Stadium Swim, the ultimate outdoor amphitheater, built for the ultimate sports fan, with a colossal screen that brings the game closer than ever. Reserve a daybed, private cabana, or lounge in the center of it all. 6 pools to dive into as the game heats up. And the best part, there's never an off-season. Open 365 days a year. Stadium Swim, it's always spectator season.
VSiN's got you covered for the start of the season with our football special. For $175, you'll get access to everything VSiN has to offer. With VSiN Pro, you'll receive daily picks straight to your inbox, detailed analysis on every game, and exclusive data like our betting splits to help you become a sharper bettor. Get all of this for just $175 through the Super Bowl. Or try a monthly subscription and get your first 30 days for only $9.99. Don't miss out on this offer. Sign up now at VSiN.com/subscribe.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back to the big VSiN Morning Line. I'm Michael Lombardi, and today we have a really special guest, my man Brian Broaddus, 1-800-BUCKET, as I like to call him, who's an expert on the Dallas Cowboys and knows everything that's going on down there at the Star. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Good morning to you.
So, 2 games in a row now, we've seen the Dallas Cowboys show no ability to actually even get the offense into a third down situation. What's the reasoning that you're hearing from the coaches inside the Star about their lack of ability to even get the team to third down?
Yeah, it has been a problem the last couple of weeks, with the Saints and the heavy packages that they play with and, the multiple tight ends, the fullback. This Cowboy team is really built more on playing against 11 personnel with the 3 wide receivers, and they're built to play with a lead and, to be able to rush the passer. And they've really had some issues with teams that use the fullback, that use the multiple tight ends. They've had a problem with teams that have had pre-snap movement with motion, the motion behind the motion. The Saints did a really nice job of that. The Ravens were a little bit more static, but their quarterback being elite with the legs and the ability to run, the option stuff that he's able to do, it's been very problematic. And this team hasn't tackled particularly well. It's given up, an extra 241 yards this year just on missed tackles alone. So they get out-gapped at times. I mentioned they missed tackles, and, they've really kind of had a problem of dealing with teams that have taken the ball and just really kind of put it on the edge. They haven't been very good at the point of attack. So, when you don't have to throw the football, run defense, then, you have to get them into some type of third down situation. There were a couple different times where they were able to get the Ravens in third down situations and to get a stop, and then that kind of drove them back into the game last week. But just the physicality that they've had to deal with on the front and the lack of tackling has been a real problem for them, Michael.
And so what has been their solution? I mean, they're obviously on a short week. They got to go up to New York. The team left yesterday. They're in New York. Like, what personnel moves? Macy Smith's had a back problem, but that defensive tackle position, Brian, has really been a sore spot for this team. And, Jerry Jones even admitted that, he hasn't done a good job of repairing the roster. What do you think they do with defensive tackle?
Yeah, that's been the $1 million question, Michael. And, I was with them in training camp in Oxnard the whole entire time. They went into the camp thinking that Mozzie Smith, Carl Davis, Justin Rogers, who they drafted from Auburn, they initially started that kind of a trend. And then it turned into they made a trade for Phillips from the Giants. They tried to sign, they have Linville Joseph right now. And, they've thrown bodies at the position. Initially, Golston started as a tackle. They've now moved him to edge. There's just a lot going on at that spot. And, they've just had some problems with it. I mean, Mozzie Smith did play better for them. And, Mozzie Smith's a first-round pick. And, people said, well, they really haven't done anything. Well, they tried to use the resources of the draft to at least, draft somebody that in the first round. And this is something that they've never done before. It appears at this point that they've selected a player that can't live up to the expectations or what they need at the position. So that's been a real problem for them. And, this team is outstanding at drafting plug and play offensive linemen. But when it comes to drafting defensive tackles, boy, it's been something that they just really, really have missed at. And that, as you well know, when you build your team and, the inside out part of it, though, that's been a problem for them.
Yeah, I know you study the opponent really closely as well. Let's talk about the New York Football Giants. What have you seen from them, and what do you think, how do they match up to this Cowboy team?
Well, it's not your Giants team of old. They did a really nice job of going into Cleveland and taking care of that. And, they ran the ball, I thought they ran the ball well enough to win the Commanders game. With Singletary, that's going to be a problem for the Cowboys. The fact that Daniel Jones will do some of the read option stuff that we've seen quarterbacks in the past give Dallas trouble with. His ability to run the ball. He's getting rid of the ball quicker, but when you play the Browns, you have to. You can't sit there and hold the ball or you'll be in trouble, with their front the way it is. So, they're trying to limit the things that Daniel has to do throwing the football. Now, when you look at with Neighbors on the outside, as you well know, I'm an LSU alum, so I've seen that kid make tremendous plays in college. One of the reasons why that Daniels won the Heisman Trophy was what Neighbors did for him last year. And I was telling some of the Giants folks, I'm like, listen, this kid's only going to get better for you. So, offensively, the Giants, they don't score a lot of points, but I think they've got the right idea for trying to protect Jones, with the way they run the football and then, with the quarterback situation is. Now, on the defensive front, this is going to be an interesting game because, what the Giants have on their front, and Dallas with the two rookies, one at center, one at left tackle. And at times Terrence Steele has had his struggles. So, it's going to be a matchup that they're going to have to try and find a way to control that front, because the way I think to beat the Giants is through their secondary. I don't think they cover particularly well. And if you can get some passes off, there's chances to make some plays, to run some routes, to gain some separation. Dallas really hasn't separated from anybody in these games the last 3 weeks, and that's something. Now, I will say this. I should say that in the fourth quarter last week against the Ravens, they had a little bit better separation. But, if they protect the front and, can get some passes off, they've got a chance to move the ball in this game. I don't know how they're going to be able to run the ball. They just don't have that ability right now as they're configured.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I kept asking is who is their running back? Like, it seemed like they ignored it, Brian. And did they over-evaluate what they had on the roster? I know they added Zeke, but to me, I just feel like I know Pollard wasn't elite last year, but he was their best back. Like, they've gone downhill in the running back area.
Yeah, I think that they've kind of figured out some things, Michael. Ezekiel Elliott is playing less and less, and the Dalvin Cook currently sits on your practice squad. And, there's kind of some whispers that Dalvin Cook is, like, hey, ready to play. Come on, let's go kind of a thing. They've had this loyalty to Ezekiel Elliott this year. But he's playing less and less. I would anticipate that maybe that, Rico Dowdle, Cook, then, and also Deuce Vaughn, and they have Hunter Lipke. They've got some guys but they just will tell you they haven't had the ability to run the football because of the way the scores have been, especially the last 2 weeks. Now, in the second half of the Cleveland game, they had a chance to work on the running game and they didn't do it. They just, they could have, instead they came out, they threw, they were just trying to kind of get out of the game. And so now they're in this spot where they really don't know if their running game is any good at all. I mean, they just, the score has been out of balance for them to try and do that. I anticipate them trying to run the football. But like I said, I think beating the Giants through the air, protect up front, they got a shot at throwing the football today. But we'll see if they can mix in a little bit of that running game. But it appears that Rico Dowdle is their number one guy, and then they kind of work from there.
Dak Prescott's most profitable opponent in the National Football League are the New York Football Giants against the spread. Yeah. I mean, do you get the sense that McCarthy understands they have to play from in front, and that first quarter is going to be really important to set the tone for this game and let Dak throw it and get the lead?
I think so, Michael. I mean, we talked about it earlier in the segment of, how Dallas took the ball against the Ravens, and then their first 15 were just awful. And I've had some questions about the way that this team has started some games. It almost appears like that McCarthy's a little bit nervous about his offensive line, with the two rookies and that situation. But, he needs to go back. That if you watch the end of the third and the fourth of that Ravens game, they were far more open. And it was CeeDee Lamb with only one catch for 9 yards. I mean, it was everybody, all hands on deck that got them back in that game. And so I kind of feel like that, if they can build off that a little bit, if they can go to a little, maybe some no huddle, if they could play with a little tempo, Dak seems to be very comfortable in that. They run 3 wide receivers on, they run 3 off. They've got these running backs that can blitz pickup, something the Giants will do. That's something that, they need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's right. Real quick, Brian, Mike McCarthy, if he doesn't win tonight, how hot's that seat?
It's very hot right now, Michael. He doesn't have a contract for next year. And so, Jerry Jones, one time he did fire Wade Phillips. He only fired Wade Phillips after he felt like that the team gave up on him. I think the team still is kind of in Mike's corner, but the minute you see that quit, that give up, then kind of keep your eye on that.
Well, thank you, Brian. We appreciate you joining us today. Enjoy the game tonight. Thank you. Go Tigers. I know you love those LSU Tigers, so we hope they have a great year. Appreciate you today, Brian.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
When we come back, top of the hour, we're going to reset the show. We're going to go over the New York Football Giants game against the Dallas Cowboys here on Thursday night, get you caught up on everything. This is the VSiN Morning Line on VSiN.
A new football season means a new lineup on VSiN. Start your day with sharp betting analysis